recently. That's actually the Docs team in New York. So we've got some of the people that are working on the Google Docs spreadsheet product over there. I see Michael and a few others. If you guys want to get on camera, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too.
Okay, and let me do another one here. Let's take that out. Okay, so I have nothing else running of interest.
You guys all set?
One, yeah, I guess so.
Okay, we're good to go. So we're actually we're joined here by Bob Frankston and Dan Bricklin, the founders and inventors of what I just call the spreadsheet, but I would say we can talk about the VisiCalc product as well, which is considered to be the first spreadsheet product ever. So thanks, guys, for joining. It's the 32nd birthday, apparently, of the release, as I think Dan posted to his stream fairly recently, October 19th, 1979, which is really exciting. And I'm a spreadsheet geek at heart. It's one of the products that I think is the closest to defining my whole path through technology. So I'm thrilled to talk to you guys. I think a lot of other people will be too. So thanks for joining. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I realize I should look back at history, because I started coding it in November 1978.
Oh, wow. So we're going to have another birthday party in November.
Yes.
We have so many birthday parties. I have, like, so many dates.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually, yeah.
This one actually is, for some reason, somebody posted on some computer history site a few days ago, or a week ago, as the day when VisiCalc shipped. And that's been every year coming up. And I posted on Google, I guess, yeah, on Google Plus, I posted that, no, that's wrong. And pointed to the material that I have, which fits with my memory, which shows what date it actually shipped.
And yeah, and that's what I saw. That was really interesting,
right.
actually.
And that's
maybe that person was a trusted tester or a beta tester or something, and they just remembered getting it on the 11th.
Yeah,
well, there were people who got it way before that.
No, it was a Gregorian versus Julian calendar problem.
But I'd love to actually hear some of the first, one of the first questions that came to mind. What problem were you solving when you first came up with the idea, or like what was VisiCalc being developed for? Was it for a specific problem?
Yeah, I was an MBA student at the time, and MBA students are given business cases, where you try to do all sorts of things from business. So basically, anything to do with business is what I was looking to do. And I came from a background in word processing. Bob came from a background in very high-powered financial forecasting and stuff.
And hacking.
And hacking and stuff. But I came from a word processing and video text editing, and both of us came from a background in interpreted systems. Bob can tell you about BASIC he implemented, and I've implemented APL a couple times. So if you put that all together, sitting in business school, you come up with the idea for a spreadsheet, which is not columns and rows.
But
which is, I mean, a lot of people, let me do a quick thing on that. A lot of people think of spreadsheet as just columns and rows, like a database. That's not what it is. What I was trying to do is text wherever and numbers wherever, and the columns and rows just make it easy to be able to name things and be able to talk about ranges.
to be able to say that.
Yes. It lets you say that by pointing. The computer can show that in a formula in a way that you can look at it and grok what it is. Also, it was easy to parse, because if it started with a letter, it was letter number, then what you were putting in was clearly a cell location, and if you were putting in something that started with a number, then it was a number.
Huh. That is interesting.
Yeah, let me get the URL, because I wrote up a lot of these design decisions.
I have links to all sorts of things, including that, Bob. If you go to, was it bricklin.com/
VisiCalc.htm?
/history. I know history's
go to VisiCalc.bricklin.com/VisiCalc.htm, as Bob said. That has a link to
great history. There's a lot of great.
Link to lots of things, including Bob's.
That's awesome.
Do you guys want to tell us a little bit about that light bulb moment when you decided you needed to make VisiCalc?
It wasn't the light bulb flicker. It took a while, but yeah.
I had a light bulb moment that I wanted to dedicate my career, the next part of my career, to it. That was while I was riding a bike on Martha's Vineyard the summer of 1978, when I decided that's what I was going to do instead of go work for an investment banking firm or something.
Yeah, but
Bob made the decision sort of slowly but surely later without sort of part. It was going to be just a few weeks? Work?
Well, I figured, no, I had flexibility. I figured if I worked on it, it's better than another part-time job. Looks like fun.
Yeah, we were hacking. I mean, Bob said he was a hacker who would, in the good sense of the word, who was doing all sorts of projects. And this was a relatively easy one to start. He had something usable and demonstratable in like a week or two. And I actually did the original prototype in a weekend.
In Basic?
In Basic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just to give you a sense, then I had worked on these, what do you call large mainframes in those days, but we treated them as personal computers. So, I got a chance to play with, own my own computer. How can I resist? And, you do, basically, there was a chance to experiment and see, what can you do with this without worrying about all the limits.
So there's specific questions, Jonathan. I know you since you've been, unlike the two of us, I mean, I was very much in spreadsheets a few years ago when I was working on VisiCalc with social text. And before that, Bob and I, back in the early 90s, were working on a spreadsheet. But in general, for a pen computer. But in general, we haven't been doing it like you have. And so it's been recently. So what are you wondering?
There's a couple of things. One of the things I think we had chatted about at some point previously was the shift from numeric spreadsheets to data, the concept. And I wondered if that was actually, whether it was in the plan or not, I wondered if you foresaw that was going to happen, where there was so much usage of the interface, the spreadsheet interface, the columns and rows, and the freedom to do anything anywhere for data, not just numbers, not just formulas.
That's what it originally was for.
Yes.
I mean, if you just typed letters into it, what did it do? It just put the letters there. It was a table editor. In terms, it was a word processor for text too. Remember, I came from word processing. I developed one of the early word processors. Back
so it's interesting.
That's the mid-70s.
So and the name still kind of drew out the calculation capability of it as well.
Hey, if we let's look at the original VisiCalc, okay?
Yeah, the name was, came up from Visible Calculator, admittedly, but it was better than the early name Dan had, Electroledger.
Calculator. Now, if you look at, let's look at the original. If you look at the original reference card, what's on the picture? It has payee, checks, deposits, electric, oil. Basically, this was to be able to do checkbooks and stuff like that. Well, Bob, yours doesn't show. Okay, Bob, say something.
Checkbooks, those are calculations.
I've got a talk.
Record keeping.
Yeah, and the examples that we gave, and always had a lot of text in it. Okay, you can see a lot of text
and graphs.
Even the graph function, right?
Yeah. It was kludgy. I mean, again, machine was not exactly fast and spacious.
Yeah, the samples, even some of the samples in the initial book that Dan Filster wrote, has text in it and stuff like that. I mean, it was used, one of the early books about using it was written in itself by somebody. It didn't even have, real good editing and stuff, but they use it as a word processor, just like there are people who use Excel as a word processor.
Actually, Apple was used for an in-out board.
So it was always to be text and numbers.
Actually,
and always to be used as a way of being able to deal with data that's randomly placed around.
Yeah, actually, one of the most impressive things, I'm blocked on his name, I should know it, the Apple III product manager later ran Office at Microsoft.
You mean Jeff Rakes?
Jeff Rakes, yes. Did a critical path model in VisiCalc, which really impressed us.
Interesting. How big a model could VisiCalc handle in the first version? How many cells or
Well, it wasn't number of cells exactly. I mean, the cells were, it was 252 columns, or
63
by 254.
254 rows.
The reason for those numbers had to with boundaries and
Right.
this.
To fit in memory. Now, it was Bob did a sparse matrix of sort, so it really depended on how many columns and rows you actually used where. It was not
How
a
you
full.
filled them.
So if you made it long and thin, it was different than if you made it wide and narrow.
Well, it was really the empty cells in the middle. I mean, there are all sorts of things in these which affect the actual space used. So we just give the amount of memory, not the number of cells.
And so was the product a hit originally when it first came out? Was it, did
That was
it
the number
immediately? Oh, right, I remember that, yeah. Was
Was
there
it a
like
hit?
a,
Yes
was it
and-
obvious that it was going to work, that it was going to just take off?
Yes and no. There were people who got it. There were people who immediately understood what it was. Did the general computing people do? No, most computer people said, well, I could write a thing like that in BASIC.
Well, why would I want it anyway?
Why would I want it? And, you know, and other people who didn't know about computers said, well, of course computers, they can predict the future, right? But it was only accountants and people who work with numbers and stuff like that who got all excited. One of them was somebody at Morgan Stanley who was one of the top people, one of the top analysts at the time. His name was Ben Rosen. He then went on later. He said wonderful things, and on my history site, you'd see what he wrote about how VisiCalc, the software tail, will wag the computer dog. And he really saw it. He ended up then investing in Lotus, and he ended up being the head of Compaq, of being the chairman of Compaq, too. So there were people who got it, but most people didn't. It sold about 1,000 units a month for the first year, which was good in those days.
Exciting in those days.
That was pretty good, considering there was $100 a copy. I mean, eventually it sold a few hundred thousand copies, and it became the dominant product over a few year period. But shall we say, was it written up in the New York Times, other than obliquely, without knowing what they were talking about? No. Was it written up in Forbes or Fortune? Bob and I, though, did show up in Fortune a little while later.
It's a strange story in its own right.
Well, I'm assuming you didn't have a Cat Eller working for you doing PR, so that's probably...
Oh, the PR person was Regis McKenna.
Oh, okay. Well, Regis needs to learn something.
Okay, they were working hard for the publisher, and they eventually got them into Business Week. It took a while, but he got like one mention. But do you think it'd be commonly? No.
Yeah.
So how did you guys go about getting more users and telling more people about the product?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that anybody who had it, suddenly people said, you know, you're not working very hard, but you're getting more work done than anybody else in the company. I mean, you know, it was a real help for a lot of people. And a lot of the people who got it were in the financial business, and they then realized that PCs were important.
Yes, I mean, the thing is, we actually hit this triple point. It was a very small amount of code, which is very high leverage, sold to the financial industry, who would then finance the thing they wanted. So it really drove the process in a way we couldn't have predicted.
And I would argue that the interface was probably the most impactful piece. It was the thing that actually carried itself across so many other places. It really changed, I think, the world for other products, not just spreadsheets, but interfaces for, you know, any developed product. When I think of some of the database products and the object that they created, the table object was driven off spreadsheets.
Actually, no, to be fair, the database were using tables for 10 years before. First used a relational database in '69. SQL, query by example, already around.
What about before, Bob? In the 40s and the 407 and you know.
Well, those are tables, but if you look at the table, you know, the table-oriented database were around. But the real, I think, goal of the interface is to make the program disappear.
Right.
The goal is for you not be aware you were using a computer.
Did you think of it as a development environment? Did you think of it where you get like the quote end user computing?
Yes. Oh, my first paper on it.
Bob, is your paper? Do you have a link to your paper?
Yes, I should be able to find it.
Bob wrote a paper which he delivered at the National Computer Conference in New York City in 1979 when we announced the product. And like almost nobody showed up to hear it because they're more interested in the secret opcodes of the TI calculators. But he talked about it. He gave the example of the telephone back in the 20s or something. When Bob was
I said in the 20s, I predicted by the 50s or the 30s, everybody would have to be a phone operator. And turns out by the 50s, everybody was. The dial made them operators. So in that sense, it gave people a chance to do their own programming.
Exactly.
But we also thought about macro capabilities and things like that. It just there was we had to.
It had macro capability.
Some people didn't realize the loader was a macro program, except we didn't have loops. But we planned that in the future, and we eventually put it in. But again, the thing people don't realize about spreadsheets is back in '79, are you familiar with the Media Lab at MIT?
Yeah.
It used to be called the Architecture Machine Group. And they were already showing heads-up displays and all these kind of things. We were familiar with that.
In fact, VisiCalc was supposed to be on a head-up display. I mean, my original design was this is the calculator that I used at Harvard Business School. And what I did was, I I imagined that it had a head-up display and that it had a ball on the bottom of it, which it didn't, but to be like a mouse, because I had seen a mouse. And then you could use it like this and click, 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 click. There's enough keys on it for alphabetics, as well as numerics. And that was my, in fact, when I did the first prototype, it didn't have arrow keys. The first prototype used the paddles of the Apple II to pretend a mouse. You would left, right, and then you hit the fire button to go up, down. And
like an Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah, it didn't work very well for various reasons, and I immediately switched it to arrow keys, of which there were only 2 on the Apple II. So you hit the space bar to switch it between horizontal and vertical, and that's why, as Bob showed on if you look at the reference card, it has a little thing in the corner where it showed which direction the arrow keys would move you.
Wow.
But see, Bob was under incredible constraints because it had to fit with the screen buffer, the operating system, the program, and all your data in 32K.
Well, but actually, I failed. I was aiming for 16K.
Yeah. So that was for the version that ran off a tape. The disk version required 48.
And what was it written in?
The disk version required 32. Yes.
And I'm guessing the whole thing was written in Java, right?
Oh no.
Well, besides the fact that Java would exist,
there were 3 go-tos in the whole thing. This Bob was a structured assembler.
There were no go-tos.
Oh, no, I thought you had to go, but it was a.
No, I had a structure. I had a call return statement.
I like the way Bob's getting very defensive over having go-tos in his code.
Yeah.
Again, this is a whole other tale. But remember when Dijkstra first talked about the go-to, but he didn't get the point. That was about understanding the code. It was not a mathematical principle.
Yeah, you show some listings on your website, if I'm not mistaken, which shows what it looks like. And the thing is, it was so that we originally had a great help system. People said, oh, it had no help system. It had none of this. Well,
we never implemented it.
The prototype had one, but it was so bad, at least it would prompt. Yeah, Bob had prompts. The prompts would tell you what letters, when you put a slash, it would tell you what letters you could press. But that prompt string was lookup table.
No, we can't. Yeah, it's true.
We'll have to write that down. People tell us we don't have a help system also.
Well, part of the
memory.
Yeah. One of the design things that we were written about is Dan was doing the reference card, and anything that you couldn't explain easily in a reference card would change the program.
Yeah.
That was the advantage of having a small team.
Interesting. So when Lotus 123 came out, was that something that you guys were proud of, or was it kind of a source of contention? You
mean what the product manager at VisiCalc did?
Yeah, Mitch was our product manager at VisiCalc, and he left.
So
there.
Mitch Kapor for the
Mitch, yeah, Mitch was very nice and showed us the product before. I got to see it before it went out, and I knew I didn't know what he was doing until I saw it. Shall we say I was kind of blown away by it. I also knew the person who programmed it, John Sachs. I had known him before. I am very happy that Mitch copied a lot of things of ours that he thought were good, didn't copy things that he thought were bad and made them better, so that our basic design continued. That was a really good thing.
It was a compliment.
in terms of my case, that's why you were sort of forced to follow that same style.
It really did set a path. I mean, I think that's where Excel then took it to the next level. And
and he also made it very popular. His marketing and all was very good, and the team he put together. So it ended up, even though he was like the 50th spreadsheet of our style, of which we were the first of our style. Mitch's is the one that really caught on and became the next major one, and then after that, Microsoft had to follow after it.
Right.
Sometimes
huge user of 123.
You have to understand that it's not so much that 123 killed the VisiCalc as for the same reason that Mitch left VisiCorp, we were having problems, in the relationship. Which this is why we don't view it as suddenly this thing came in that killed us. There are issues already in progress.
Yeah, it felt like an evolution.
Yeah, on the Apple III, we had a really nice advanced version of VisiCalc. Unfortunately, it was on the Apple III. We had problems, and then you'll see there obviously were some business problems that Lotus had with regards to Windows, and they dropped the ball switching to Windows, and they lost it.
And the sad part is I tried to warn them.
Yeah.
I was at Lotus at that point, and actually in Discovery, somebody found a memo where I was trying to warn, saying, here's what's going to happen, here's what you have to do.
Yeah, sometimes business gets in the way of great technology, too.
When Bob was at Lotus, was it Lotus.com was on your desk?
Yes.
The internet, shall we say.
It was before the web, but it was email. I was running Lotus.com on my desk for 2 years.
That's really.
They didn't get. I mean, they were. Bob was sort of helping introduce something new to them.
But even I didn't get the fact that I could have gotten Microsoft.com, but didn't.
That's right. So what do you think is next? The next killer. You guys really, came up with what I would call the killer app. And what do you think is next? What's happening now? Like, do you think there's some of these things that are just going to evolve, or do you think there is sort of another interface or another concept that's going to draw us all to either new computers or new technologies?
That's such a wide question.
Yeah, be more
I guess I'm interested in what you guys are working on that might be the next. Like, what are you going to do? Do you think that's potentially groundbreaking, or I know social calculation and social calc is something that you guys have worked on.
Bob's been involved in the connectivity world of making sure something that he started when he was at Microsoft.
Yeah, let me just tell you the interest, and this is a different topic, so we can have a separate discussion. But your home networks?
Yeah.
They're originally supposed to be like cell phones. You're going to pay each month and be told what you can do with it.
That's what year, Bob? That was the vision that Microsoft and others had back in?
Everybody bought into that, yes.
What year?
Well, in January 1995, I decided that home networks were going to be do-it-yourself. That was a time when networking was so mysterious that there was no way people could do their own network. So I just said, well, I'll just remove what's hard.
Right. And so you had to reboot things every time.
No, it wasn't just rebooting. You had to manage the routers and set up this. And I won't go into it. And basically the idea was, we shipped it in Windows 98 SE, was you just plug it into your internet connection. You can get a shared, what we call now a router, was a NAT, and connect all your PCs, and they share the connection. And there was no charge per PC. Nobody could stop you from doing a webcam. Remember, webcams are going to be banned. So today I'm continuing that.
In fact, if you look behind Bob, that room was the prototype for where home networking would be.
Yeah, all your home networks came from this room. And right now I'm continuing this, and this is another discussion. Basically, the concept of telecommunications is a 19th century telegraph concept, and you shouldn't pay merely to exchange bits. But as I said, that's going to get us on a whole other...
Exactly, sorry. I didn't mean to take us totally...
No, I'm just saying. So I think the larger point is, when you ask what the future is, there's so many possibilities. And it reminds me back in early 70s, or even 60s, when Dan and I were using computers, I remember trying to explain to people email. And why would anybody do that? I was doing word processing back in the 60s, using, so it's often hard to even describe all the possibilities, but it's not so much that we see the future, we just see the present that people are ignoring.
But what do you think for spreadsheets? What's next for spreadsheets? Like, it's been fairly stable now for, I don't know what to call it, 15 years or something.
That's up to you. You can force people to have new things and train them on it. You have YouTube, to show them. Well, everybody has YouTube to show them, but you have new ways of being able to teach things. You can deploy to millions of people at once. Basically, you and Microsoft are in the best position for those things. Now, Microsoft over the years has been adding lots of things. They, reacting to, as far as I can tell, reacting to user need and especially to competitors like Lotus, came out with pivot tables and stuff like that to add stuff. But you added a better integration with forums and stuff, right? Is one of the things, and the real-time collaboration to many people. There is social, which we're going to see. That's what the work that I did with social text, where I took my JavaScript spreadsheet, VisiCalc, and we put it together with their social software, with where people have identities and they have streams of what they do and all that stuff, and tied it together with pages of stuff and spreadsheets that were live, that were also shared, where you can have pieces of a spreadsheet here and refer to them and do all the things you want, and roll things up, etc. Within a company. That's one way you can add those features if you're the leader like you are.
But it's interesting to look at the history, which features over time stayed and which didn't. The most interesting was Borland's Quattro, which basically made it a better presentation tool. And as a reminder that for many people, the spreadsheet is really just a presentation tool. They might not even know how to do calculations.
What was one of the best things that Multiplan and then Excel had over 1, 2, 3? It had the little grid lines when it printed it out.
Yeah.
And we were asked to get rid of them.
No, don't laugh. That's
you need to make it optional.
It's optional, and it made it possible. If you were using it for data. My mother, who at the time was a school principal, one day came and said to me, "Daniel, did you know that you can calculate in a spreadsheet?" She had been using it just for school class lists and stuff for the last year or two.
And keyboards often had calculators.
So you mentioned sort of docs taking direction. Somebody on the thread earlier asked a question. Has docs gone in the direction, Google Docs, that you imagined it would go? Now that when you saw we did spreadsheets in Google Docs, did it go the way you expected, or where would you take it if you had it?
I don't know. I mean,
and it's okay to be critical.
Since I was programming around the same time, that you were coming out with yours, and you seem to take correct me if I'm wrong, but what I see is you made sure that you were as compatible data-wise pulling in from XLS files, from Excel. Is that?
Some people would argue we weren't that good at it, but I think the most important thing we focused on was collaboration. Then we said, well, we need people to know where to start.
Right, and you did the collaboration. But, well, the thing is you had enough that they could pull things in.
Yeah.
I concentrated, because of the corporate nature of stuff that was being done at Social Text, and the fact that it was going to be used on the one laptop per child as the spreadsheet that people would get because it was small and open source. I concentrated on being able to handle thousands of rows of data, which was not something that you did because you worked you worked with much smaller. But the collaboration was a real important thing, and collaboration was hot then. That's when what was it? What was Google doing then?
You mean the Peter Salas thing, the Java imitation?
No. What was the real-time Google thing?
Google, I was thinking of Lotus. My mind slipped.
No, Google.
It wasn't back that far.
No, there was Buzz and the Microsoft technology underneath.
I remember it. The one where we all type simultaneously. It kind of looks like. Yeah.
Oh, Wave.
Wave, yes.
Yeah, Wave came a little later.
Wave really showed, and now when I saw that, I mean, to me, it's like real-time collaboration, with very quick collaboration. The one laptop per child was built around that.
Right.
They took my spreadsheet, and I built my spreadsheet so it could be collaborative, and they actually made collaboration out of it. The guys at Buzzword over at Adobe, it became Adobe, they were doing a word processor that was collaborative and stuff.
That's right.
And I watched how people were using it, and clearly real-time collaboration and after-the-fact collaboration and serial collaboration has become very important. People with identities, so you know who did it.
Well, that's the identity thing is a whole nother discussion. By the way, IIW is taking place right now. I'm thinking San Jose.
There's a conference going
There's
on.
actually another user who had a question about social spreadsheets. He says, how are social spreadsheets currently being used, and what leverage does a social spreadsheet have over a traditional wiki? That was a question to Dan.
Dan,
It's on a YouTube video.
Yeah, this comes from somebody who did a video of me back in 2008 when we were announcing Social Text VisiCalc spreadsheet, and VisiCalc has moved a lot since, and I learn a lot from them, and I go to some of the enterprise conferences about social software. What I've learned is that social software is, it's not something you just add to, on the side, like you add printing or something like that. Social has flows and people with identity, and there you have to deal with all sorts of security issues within a corporation, at least, issues that you're dealing with Google Plus and stuff, but you want to tie it into the fact that you're doing your editing and all. That's what makes it social, to be able to find stuff. You need to be able to take from, what we found is people want to be able to take pieces out of some spreadsheet that may be rolled up from other spreadsheets done by other people. So I have a spreadsheet which is rolled up to another spreadsheet, and there's a master spreadsheet. They roll up, and this piece here is put into a document live. And those are some of the things that we would deal with. And that's, I think, as we're learning more how social integrates with everything, the spreadsheet is just one of the ways of expressing data. Text is one way, the word processor. You're adding presentation graphics, which is another way, two-dimensional, with graphics and all, is how people, and many pages, sequential pages or some branching, that's another way of expressing yourself. The spreadsheet, for many people, is the way of expressing things that have more data, either regular data or numeric data, calculations, and it just fits in with everything else that you want to do social. Social isn't just a short 140-character thing, though that's a very valuable one, as we found out. It isn't just shared documents, though it is shared document things that are text documents. It isn't just, presentation, it isn't just spreadsheet, but it's all of the things together, and video, and, we're just learning how, when we don't have a space issue, if it's as if we're all in the same room, what we can do. And you guys at least have a lot of experience with some of the plumbing, with the work that you did with Wood.
Yeah, that was key for us. I mean, the plumbing was important. We started in spreadsheets, actually.
A thing that's, the corporation would be concerned about, and all sorts of people, is it has a privacy issue, but being able to do audit trails. How did we get here? Wave was filled with this, right? And, if corporate use of spreadsheet, to be able to, well, who changed that number? Now, there's another way where spreadsheets might go, which we at Software Arts, this is back in the 80s, had looked at, is to expand what we mean by a value. Right now, in a spreadsheet, a value is either a number, text, or a formula that produces text or numbers, okay? But it's basically a single value as a string or a number. We actually implemented a spreadsheet and shipped it that had what we called by values. It let you have two values at the same place, and you could display things like the difference between the last calculation and this calculation. You could display all sorts of stuff. You could have standards. Bob has talked about significance. Why doesn't a spreadsheet and calculations percolate through significance?
Let me explain what that means. In other words, when you do a lot of calculations, low order bits become fuzzy. And so if you have a number 1,793,536,764 and 3 cents after calculating 10 years planning, that 3 cents is not exactly significant. In fact, but yet people make these decisions by taking that number, subtract from another number, and say it's 3 cents more in 10 years if we do this, and that's absurd.
We also did something else at Software Arts. We had a product called TK Solver that had units, where the number had associated with it what unit it was in. So you could actually add millimeters to inches and get results in whatever in furlongs, if you wanted. So those are just some of the simple things that could be added to spreadsheets. But computers, the spreadsheet was one use of computers. The word processor was another. The presentation graphics. We've added video, audio. We've added the social graph and stuff like that of various sorts. It's amazing. We always say we've invented the last thing, and then we had PageMaker and stuff like that. There were a lot of products at the time came out with desktop publishing, and then the web came in, and what?
I remember back in the early '90s, we had the 6 categories. What else can we do to get people to buy computers?
Yeah. And we thought e-commerce was going to be the thing. Well, then we found out paid search actually may be valuable too. And then
people don't remember Eileen Lang. Alta Vista.
Yeah, Alta Vista. Right.
Now that'd be an anniversary for you to do.
Exactly. All of the search guys do that one.
But then to find out that, how silly. Twitter, so silly, right? And Facebook, so silly. Well, it turns out.
Absolutely.
Same
with online storage.
There's an essay on my website on Bricklin.com in the writing section about what will people pay for, which I think was actually reprinted in the Harvard Business Review at one point. About people pay to talk to their friends and relatives. They don't actually pay to listen to the radio, to listen to a professional, right? But they will pay good money to say, "Hey, what's up?" to their friends, and that was what drove a lot of things like, like Facebook and stuff like that.
Great. So we know we've seen all the stuff kind of guiding us, obviously, so much deeper on the web. We got to wrap up in a little less than 5 minutes, but I'm curious if you guys have any really insightful predictions. Something that you guys would say, we think we know where this is going. We've seen these things, fail and then succeed later, and or succeed out of the gate because of conditions.
You mean in terms of spreadsheets?
What's that?
In terms of spreadsheets.
Well, it doesn't have to be spreadsheets because, again, I think you guys are, there's so much focus on spreadsheets because of where you came from, right? What you did, and it was so impactful. It was one of the most impactful things probably in your careers, but obviously you've done so many other things. I think your experience overall kind of lets you say, be our guides. What do you think? What do you predict is going to be big next? What's coming?
Well, I basically want to remove the barrier to connecting things. So today's internet is just an engineering prototype. We're going to start to see what happens when we can assume things are connected in a way that most people can't even imagine now. But again, that's a long discussion in its own right.
Yeah. Okay. So connectivity, you think, is going to take it a leap?
Oh, yes. The stuff in the middle called telecommunications is going to disappear.
That would be great. What do you think, Dan?
Well, I see a couple things. Well, first of all, with spreadsheets, you're driving some of that. Microsoft is, in a way, following, though they're, as usual, doing a really heavy-duty job. And Excel is so full and so powerful and so appropriate for so many people, not everybody, but particular people who need it. And Microsoft is going there. You're going there, providing it for many people. So I think what we're seeing is that the thing that you've been pioneering, that people have learned to love and use from planning weddings to to planning I guess major business things. That seems to be one way where it's clearly going, and you have a responsibility to do it well and to understand what's going on. Where I see other things going clearly are in having a computer when you're not sitting at a desk, where you're at different places. The computer that you carry with you. Now, I'm an iPhone, iPad developer. The last couple of years, I've been working on Note-Taker HD, which is an app that runs on the iPad. And now we have Siri, on our iPhones and stuff like that. What we're seeing from that is that different user interfaces are needed for different things. The spreadsheet showed us that for working with numbers and letters and text in a way that required calculations and stuff, we needed a certain interface. The cell phone is showing us that we need a certain type of interface. The tablet, which is a different size, opens up whole other interface abilities. What would be the right type of spreadsheet on it? I mean, I've done some work with that, some experimentation on it. Of what would be the right way to express spreadsheets on a tablet, and what's the right way to express it as an author, especially as a collaborative author, on a phone. Those are going to be either interesting challenges. Apple is showing us some interesting ways of using voice, and the games and others have shown us some interesting ways of using touch.
And also, remember, the non-computer interfaces, gestures, looking. You're doing some face recognition already. That we're gonna have to, the Connect and all these things. We're going to be experimenting with all different, and basically the computer itself is going to disappear. But we need to be very careful. It's not going to be smart devices as much as interactive surfaces and things, because if devices become too smart, they start second guessing us in ways we might not like.
Right.
That's a whole other discussion about Siri.
Exactly.
What do we learn from Siri? And
Google Voice. The speech on this. By the way, as a footnote, I first tried to introduce a Dragon people to Microsoft in the 90s.
Oh, and Dragon is now Nuance, which is what's behind Siri. Right?
That's right.
I mean, the world, it's a small world. It's a small world. It's great to talk to you, Jonathan, because you're part of our part of the world now.
That's right.
You're part of that thing that went from me and Bob through Mitch and Klunder and the people who worked on the various spreadsheets, and now you're one of the ones in that world. Hopefully for us and our children, I guess. Hopefully it will continue to be something that people will find of interest, in the future. And
I agree. That's great.
Keep it relevant.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, that's a great wrap-up, I think. So thanks so much, guys. This has been really exciting for me, and I think for the other people here, and hopefully for the listeners. And it'll be broadcast on YouTube, so it'll be there for other people to see as well.
Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
I actually noticed somebody using a Lenovo tablet there. Interesting.
It's great. I think that's the last of its kind in that room.
Who are the guys
with the burden of the next step?
Yeah, do we get questions from you guys?
Oh, those are other Googlers. I encourage them to ask questions too.
Yeah. What was it that you guys liked? Anything you learned, or? No.
Well, we just enjoyed hearing the history.
Put them on the spot.
Exactly, and that's some of the team that works directly on the spreadsheets product within Docs as well.
We don't usually let engineers talk to the world, so we're not used to this.
But who else
Exactly.
talks to the world?
They're pretty important in that scheme of burden that you laid on my shoulders. I'll tell you, Michael Varelli and Jason Ganetsky. We've got Ziegs there, Matt Siegelbaum, Zach Lloyd, and Josh Danzinger. Thanks, guys, for joining. Appreciate it.
Hiding.
Hello.
We were wondering if that was the same attic that you wrote VisiCalc in.
No, actually, it's not. That attic is in Arlington, Massachusetts. There's some similarities, but that was actually much bigger.
Yeah, this is the one that VisiCalc paid for.
Yes.
This one has air conditioning. The other one didn't.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I did put air conditioner in the window, but it worked at night, so it wasn't as much of an issue.
That's great.
But actually, the thing is, it was programmed mostly in the winter.
That's right. Thanks so much, guys. Again, I appreciate it. Hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 The person disappears.
I assume they turned off the feed.
Well, I'm waiting for the feed to disappear. Then I know it's over.
Yeah.
As I walk around the room, people are going to be
Bob,
watching.
it's good to see you, even though you're a block away.